Imagine being able to publish a book that sells over and over and over again, not even letting up for a minute. We're talking if you were to publish a book back in August of 2018 and it's still selling the same to today in 2023. Well, that's what brings our guest to today's podcast. His name is Sean Cannell, and he actually happens to be the forefront of a channel called Think Media on YouTube, where they share a lot about video content creation. In fact, I learned a lot from Sean Cannell over the years and even attended one of his events in Las Vegas called Grow with Video. And I was just elated when his team had reached out to me and said Sean was interested in appearing on this podcast to talk a little bit more about YouTube Secrets, his book with Benji Travis. And so I think it's going to be a lot of fun just to kind of pick his brain, see what it takes to put out a book that continues to sell again and again, a perennial seller, if you will. So without any further ado, it's with great pleasure I introduce you to Sean Cannell. Sean, YouTube Secrets was launched in August 2018. It's just absolutely fantastic to see this book continues to crush it. It is a perennial seller. What went behind all the work of YouTube Secrets? What was that like starting to build up to that launch in 2018?
Yeah, the crazy thing is our ambition, and I co-wrote it with my friend Benji, was we were like, it's going to take about a year to get a book out. It's self-published, and we figure, 12 months, maybe a little longer. But what ended up happening was it was about a 4-year process. Now, it didn't have to have been that long, but the reason why it was because we really wanted it to be right and not rushed. And one of the things I've learned about great books is a lot of blood, sweat, and tears went into them. And so there was a few advantages we had. We had Benji's experience in YouTube. We had my experience in YouTube. He was more the YouTube celebrity side with his wife. I was more like the freelancer behind the scenes with other people. So it was really an obsession with the content. But then we also, what ended up happening because of that time was we grew a YouTube channel together and interviewed, by the time the book came out, over 100 different entrepreneurs and creators. So it was just part of it wasn't even just, is this a good book, but are these hypotheses actually proven? Does our framework actually work? Has it been tested in multiple environments? Have we really scoured the landscape of planet Earth to find the best and brightest voices? And then have we wrote and rewrote it as well? And some of it was being a little busy, especially on my part. Like if we would have, lessons I've learned is if you really wanted to get a book out faster, block the time properly on your calendar to really drive it all the way to the finish line, as opposed to try to chip away at it. You got to do what you got to do. And that's kind of what happened to us. But if you chip away at it while you're juggling 48 other things and probably you can only handle 30, I was already kind of overloaded. So all of those things were sort of a piece of it. But the net result was, to your point, a perennial seller. And I think it's because it's truly a great book and a lot of time went into it. It wasn't a rushed ChatGPT wrote it, ebook came out in 4 seconds, and just kind of a cash grab. And I think that has been proven. The one other big piece was the obsession to actually build a framework, just like Stephen Covey or many people who understand the power of frameworks in the self-help business development industry. Like if it's a good framework, it's an unbreakable framework. You can't really add, you could add something to it, but it's unnecessary. You can't take anything away. Does it stand the test of time? And that's a weird thing to say with a book about YouTube and social media. But the cool thing is the 7 C's of YouTube success in part 1 of the book are timeless as long as the platform remains. And that's still true today now that we're, fast forward 5 years past the launch date of the book. But the second part was then more tactical, strategic now stuff. And that's why we had a second edition. So the second edition was a rewrite, a deleted chapter, some new chapters, polish, and that is now just overlaid over the original Amazon listing. So we retain the reviews. I think I learned that from Tim Ferriss. The book does say 2018, but really it's like a late 2022 release in its current version. But you can't really change the title or the date, or it messes up the listing and the reviews and everything else. So when I look at like 4 Hour Work Week, he overlaid the new and revised version continuing to compound on that original listing. Certainly you could have started a whole new listing. I think it might be a new ISBN or whatever, but I'm not sure. Anyways, that's all part of it. So it was quite a journey. I just think pain, struggle, time, rewrites, not wanting to rush it. And I think that's a big pressure for people in today's world when social media is so fast. Twitter tweets are just in the now, and they're short, and it's all bite-sized, digestible. To put out a real work of substance, deep work, Cal Newport, like to really actually do some deep work, you need time, you need margin, and that the net result was a book we're pretty proud of.
Nice. You work with Benji. You guys are pretty good friends, obviously. What was that process like of writing a book together? And also, what was the creative process like? Because obviously there are probably some give and take right there.
Yeah. Well, so what helped us was going third-party ghostwriter so that they could consolidate our voices. And that was a huge key. We decided that there was no way we were going to be able to sit down and like you type and then I type, or we work our way through all of that. Also, we wanted to do that. That'd be another reason why I think the book is maybe objectively a well-written book. Neither of us had previous experience as being a writer, and we hired a writer. So, a writer, an actual properly skilled writer to synthesize our voices. And then I forget what it's called, but it ended up being like third person removed or something or whatever. So even the tone of the book is we don't really kick it back and forth and say who's saying what, or we may, when we story tell, it's all smooth. It's all really, so that was a huge key. So that third person helping us was a key. Our brainstorming process was kind of corkboard, note cards, writing out chapter ideas, working on the outline, and then contributing to it, our strengths and weaknesses. So for example, like when we talk about the community C out of the 7 C's of YouTube success, him and his wife with their vlog channel have built a massive kind of community, and he told certain stories that related to that aspect. So it kind of naturally flowed there. There's a chapter all about search-based SEO, ranking videos, which is like my favorite thing. And that's kind of completely my wheelhouse. In the second edition, some of the new chapters were basically just written entirely by me. If it was kind of completely my frameworks, like I created the perfect video recipe, and that would be something the second edition came out with. So all of that's kind of chopped up. And then in the audiobook, we alternated chapters. There was as we re-recorded the second edition of the audiobook, it wasn't necessarily just you go and then I go. It was actually saying, again, which of these lend more towards your personality. I think that's what also was helpful, because in the YouTube world, there's sort of like the business owner entrepreneur mindset towards YouTube. I lean that way, service provider or educators. And then there's kind of the entertainer, vlogger side of things. And so each kind of piece of the whole picture, it was pretty clear. Like there actually wasn't much conflict in terms of like, yeah, you take this one, I'll take this one. And so that's kind of how we worked it out.
That's really cool to hear. You guys really could hash it out. And I find it so interesting that you guys decided to go with the ghostwriter, so that way it was more clean when it came out. In the second edition, you had mentioned adding some other chapters. Did you write those yourself, or did you have to reach out to your ghostwriter again to do that section?
We did, but I would say by that time, I had transformed personally to where I wrote, 99% of the perfect video recipe chapter, rewrote the social media chapter, I wrote that, and then Benji kind of came in and contributed a couple stories. So I actually opened up Google Docs, basically wrote the entire chapter. Nevertheless, we still let the ghostwriter kind of be like a finisher. So I would argue it's not, in this case, ghostwriter is maybe not even the right term. It's more like writer synthesizer, because, in some cases they might do crazy amounts of heavy lifting. Especially towards the second edition, it was kind of very little. We're doing heavy lifting on the research and the data and the study. And so it's more like polishers, making sure things are right. Yeah. And then also having a good editor too, to polish out those rough edges. So I, as far as personally, when I think of my future too, I think that going through this process, me, the communicator things I've learned, the reader as well, being a voracious reader, I actually think I would always work with a great editor, of course.
Yeah.
And maybe, somebody that helps do that fight, like just adds gasoline to the fire that's already burning. As far as today goes, but I do actually have a lot of confidence I've built going through this process in writing myself. And so it is something I am ambitious to do, not exactly in this season, but thinking about what's the follow-up, what's next, what are some of my solo projects, perhaps, traditional publisher on the next move and some of those thoughts. But it's actually not even the biggest problem I'm trying to solve at this moment, but those are just a few thoughts.
So this book has just been a massive success because I've watched you this whole time. I've got the first edition. Now you've convinced me I need to go get the second edition now. So what kind of work did you put into marketing this? Like, how has this been a hit? Besides the fact it's a great read, what went into you sending traffic there and getting it to where it's consistently performing?
Yeah, a lot. So, this goes back to, I think, to a couple of things I've learned. What I worked at a church and I was on staff as the marketing director, basically, and I helped the pastor write and launch books. I went to a Ryan Deiss digital marketer event about Kindle EPUB, and we got software to turn a Word doc into a Kindle book from that offer. And I went to the event and I consumed the course, and I actually then interviewed him and wrote the outline and got 10 hours of audio, and then gave that to a woman in the church who volunteered, who was a decent writer, to translate it. Our graphic designer did the cover. So we launched a couple different books. And so in my study of marketing in general, in my study of books, and in my study of events, those things seem related, that 99% of people grossly underestimate the amount of effort and actions needed to make a dent in the noise of getting people to buy tickets to an event or getting people to buy your book. And so the mentality, because I've done both things in my career, was just sort of, it kind of makes me think of Grant Cardone 10X rule. Like you're thinking about, you want to take like a few actions, you should actually multiply your actions by 10, if not more. And so I learned that back then, in terms of people might like post one Instagram, like my book's out, and like go on, pay some PR firm and I learned these lessons too. Back then we paid a PR firm. Thank God it wasn't my money. I never would have approved it. Like over 10 grand, and got like 2 traditional radio spots or something that absolutely made no dent in book sales. Whereas on the flip side, I was doing content marketing to free lead magnet to list building, understanding that if you want to just sell a bunch of books, you want to just press send on an email list that you started building 10 years before you wanted to launch your book. Like, I had learned these foundational principles. I learned from Chalene Johnson. She's like, I went on Kelly Ripa and like Good Morning America and sold no books. I partnered up with podcasters and people that had email lists, and they sent one email, and I sold thousands of books. So you started learning like where are the things, that actually drive book sales. And then could that be your borrowed credibility, building a relationship of people you're going to collab with or that may promote for you, and or digging your well before you're thirsty. So I was coming in with maybe almost a decade of experience, counting the 4 years of preparing. That was another piece of YouTube Secrets. We were building an email list for 4 years. We were building a YouTube channel for 4 years. We were building Michael Hyatt platform, a platform for 4 years. In addition to our other platforms, that was another reason why we hit pause. It wasn't as much procrastination. It was, I remember as soon as we got the ball down the field of, we're going to do this, we're committed, we're going to have a writer help us, and we're let's have it out in about a year. It was actually, now that I recall, I was like, no, let's actually set a goal to have at least 25,000 people on an email list before the book comes out. So the work we have to do now, we could be writing it, but actually step one, because yes, you could talk about it on your vlog, and yes, I could talk about it on my random YouTube channels, but do any of those people actually care about this? So let's reverse engineer a platform that would care about this exact book topic, an email list that would care about this exact book topic. So to consolidate the 2,643 different tactics that I apply to book marketing, I think that is the big answer. It was It was YouTube videos with awareness. It was going on other people's podcasts, making your own content across platforms, build an email list. Think about different. We did ultimately do some PR, meaning we had somebody help us write some LinkedIn articles. I don't think those did very good, but they were all right. Turn some of the chapters into articles. If you could get traditional media. These days, I personally have been featured. The book was featured in Forbes, not the main thing, but I don't even know if it counts, because it's like some writer at some buried place on the website where it says this isn't even like a Forbes thing, but you got Forbes and you have the logo for your website. But on the flip side, I ended up getting in CNBC properly. They did like a 10-minute mini documentary on me in terms of some of the stuff we've done. And these days it's like Vox. Was it Vox? It was Vice. We got Vice. We got in, Forbes, Entrepreneur, Success. And not that wasn't all necessarily a part of the book, but all of that to say is it's sort of, your listeners would understand book, credibility, brand, awareness, platform. And so without, getting too granular, it was like all of the things, a lot. My friend Rory Vaden talks about this. Like you do all the things, and it's like the compound effect, the flywheel effect of all of them. Even in some cases where you're like, this didn't work out, but we got it over indexed over here. We got more results from this activity, or we went on 10 podcasts, but it was really one that like did well. And then a friend of mine said also, a big key to a successful book launch is don't even just launch it, but keep it going. And his thing was, he said, do at least one thing every week where you're talking about your book, basically forever. So a lot of times people think about 1 week or 6 weeks, or like, how do you, like, what's fascinating is I would argue we were somewhat disappointed with the opening week, and it wasn't coordinated very well because, we ranked on Amazon or whatever, but no Wall Street Journal or anything. I don't even know if we would have qualified, or like USA Today. Like we could have hit USA Today by volume. Fast forward to today, and the book is over 100,000 copies sold. So we didn't have any super flashy besides legit Amazon #1 spots in certain categories, but nothing outside of that. So while the opening week wasn't that impressive, and I sometimes think that's what everybody focuses on, the longevity is much more impressive. And so I think the slow and steady wins. I think too many people think you're exhausted, you get to the time of the book, you just promote it a little bit, and then you're on to the next thing. Like we're on the same thing, and we wanted to make it better, wrote second edition, and then still talking about it. Even as I talked to you, I was on a flight yesterday thinking, man, I got to just circle back and keep promoting the same book. People also get tired. They're like, I should write a new book. I heard Dean Graziosi, when I think he hit 100,000, his team was like, congrats, this is amazing. Like, all right, what's next? What's the next book? He goes, next book? We're only at 100,000. Like, we could keep promoting this book. Like, let's talk about it more, double down. How do you say the same thing in new ways? How do you share the same message in new places? How do you keep just doing what you did once before and networking more? And you got a couple new followers. Everyone forgot about it. Or even if they heard about it, there's so much noise. You need 10, 20, 30 brand impressions, to even break through the noise. And people are not necessarily in the moment where they're caring about that, but they followed you for a while thinking they may want to do YouTube. Now it's 6 months later, and now they finally decided, and they forgot you had a book because there's 48 books. So summary, I've said a lot though, is to absolutely multiply the number of actions you think it takes. Do all the things a lot. That'd be reverse engineered on your work ethic too, but I just sort of had like a psycho mentality. Like I'm going to do 10,000 things 10,000 times, and net result is the book is done okay.
Yeah, I'd say for sure, far beyond okay, because I feel like you are the gold standard right now in the niche of talking about YouTube via platforms like Amazon and beyond. So congratulations on all that success, man. I knew we'd be able to fill 20 minutes like it's nobody's business, but I think you are the perfect person to answer this question, because I've always found a lot of your message to be motivational and inspirational. This is another reason why, folks, you got to pick up a copy of YouTube Secrets, and you'll see why I dig Sean so much. So what advice do you have for aspiring authors and self-publishers out there?
Thanks again for having me. And, I think that one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life with Benji, co-author, is write a book. But one of the most things I'm most proud of in my life is writing a book, and it transformed me. There's maybe the public benefits, and there's certainly those are the accolades. But what I would encourage aspiring writers is to be less worried about the destination and more excited about the journey, and understanding that, okay, hopefully it leads to massive sales. And of course, it could also lead to a lot of, if your education or, business, entrepreneurship, maybe it's to build your business. It's a business card. It's all these different things. But I just encourage, finish your book, get your book done, get it out there, because you'll be a whole different human being by going through this process. And as you know, a lot of books get sidelined. A lot of books don't make it to the finish line. A lot of books get started, but don't actually end up getting finished. So maybe someone's listening. I'm certain probably someone's listening to this right now, and it's halfway done, or it's done but it's not edited, or it's not quite perfect yet, and you're exhausted. The framework doesn't quite work. It doesn't feel like it flows properly, but you are just exhausted, and you've given up because it's maybe a little confusing. You're in the messy middle. The middle is so messy and so painful and so heavy. You're in the messy middle. I want to encourage not everybody who's thinking about writing a book, you got to do it because it'll change you. Anyone who's stuck in the middle, persevere, because getting this thing to market, getting this thing out, getting this thing listed, getting this thing posted, that's when you get all the opportunity, but also you just finishing it is going to be a profound experience in your life that will change you as a person.